Morning, everyone. We're excited to have you attending our service today. Our speaker today is Paymaneh Parhami. Her topic is Racial Prejudice, a Blight on Human Progress. Our opening prayer today is a YouTube video, and immediately following the YouTube video, our intro reading will be done by Dan Crossman. Let me share my screen.
Dispel my grief by thy bounty and thy generosity, O God, my God, and banish mine anguish through thy sovereignty and thy might. Thou seest me, O my God, with my face set towards thee at a time when sorrows have compassed me on every side. I implore thee, O thou who art the Lord of all being, and overshadowest all things visible and invisible, by thy name, whereby thou hast subdued the hearts and the souls of men, and by the billows of the ocean of thy mercy, and the splendors of the day star of thy bounty, to number me with them whom nothing whatsoever hath deterred from setting their faces toward thee, O thou Lord of all names, and maker of the heavens. Thou beholdest, O my Lord, the things which have befallen me in thy days. I entreat thee, by him who is the dayspring of thy names, and the dawning place of thine attributes, to ordain for me what will enable me to arise to serve thee, and to extol thy virtues. Thou art verily the Almighty, the most powerful, who art wont to answer the prayers of all men. And finally, I beg of thee by the light of thy countenance to bless my affairs, and redeem my debts, and satisfy my needs. Thou art he to whose power and to whose dominion every tongue hath testified, and whose majesty and whose sovereignty every understanding heart hath acknowledged. No God is there but thee, who hearest and art ready to answer. Baha'u'llah.
This is the day when pure hearts have a portion of the everlasting bounties, and sanctified souls are being illumined by the eternal manifestations. Praise be to God. You are believers in God, assured by the words of God and turning to the kingdom of God. You have heard the divine call. Your hearts are moved by the breezes of the paradise of Abha. You have good intentions. Your purpose is the good pleasure of God. You desire to serve in the kingdom of the Merciful One. Therefore, arise in the utmost power, be in perfect unity. Never become angry with one another. Let your eyes be directed toward the kingdom of truth and not toward the world of creation. Love the creatures for the sake of God and not for themselves. You will never become angry or impatient if you love them for the sake of God. Humanity is not perfect. There are imperfections in every human being, and you will always become unhappy if you look toward the people themselves. But if you look toward God, you will love them and be kind to them. For the world of God is the world of perfection and complete mercy. Therefore, do not look at the shortcomings of anybody. See with the sight of forgiveness. The imperfect eye beholds imperfections. The eye that covers faults looks towards the creator of souls. He created them, trains and provides for them, endows them with capacity in life, sight and hearing. Therefore, they are the signs of his grandeur. You must love and be kind to everybody. Care for the poor, protect the weak, heal the sick, teach and educate the ignorant. Abdul Baha, The Promulgation of Universal Peace.
Thank you very much, Dan. Before I move to our speaker, we have a song called The Human Garden, which we will play. We'll move over to our main speaker.
this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side. Love ye all religions, and all races, with the love that is true, true and sincere, and show that love through deeds, and show that love. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side. The tone of grandeur, however, in the day of his manifestation, proclaimed it is not his to boast, to love with his country, but it is his who loveth the world. Love ye all religions, and all races, with the love that is true, true and sincere, and show that love through deed, and show that love. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side. Even as flowers grow and blend together, side by side, by side.
We will now turn things over to Paymaneh. Remember the procedures for asking questions. There is a button at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand. When Paymaneh is done speaking, I will unmute anybody who has their hand raised that we can ask the questions. If you post any questions in the commenting section, I will read the questions off for everyone to hear. For biography reading, our speaker is Paymaneh Parhami. The topic is Rachel's Prejudice, a Blight on Human Progress. Paymaneh is a recent graduate of Berkeley Law School. She will begin working at a well-known law firm in San Francisco in January. She specializes in trademark and copyright law. Before law school, Paymaneh spent a year volunteering at the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel, as the administrative assistant of the Department of Security. Paymaneh hopes to use her law degree as a beneficial tool to follow Baha'u'llah's admonition, to be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. With that, I turn it over to Paymaneh.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. I hope you've all been doing well and staying safe. I'm going to start off today with just a story. So I want to start off today by telling you a story about Louis Gregory. Mr. Gregory was one of the first African-American Baha'is in the US, and this story is about one of his interactions with Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. So during the visit of Abdu'l-Baha in the United States in 1912, a luncheon was held in his honor, and it was given in Washington, D.C. by Mirza Ali Quli Khan and Madame Khan, who were both Baha'is. Khan was at that time the charge d'affaires of the Persian legation in the capital city, and many notable people were invited, some of whom were members of the official and social life of DC, as well as a few Baha'is. Just an hour before the luncheon, Abdu'l-Baha sent word to Louis Gregory so that he might come to him for the promised conference. So Louis arrived at the appointed time, and the conference went on, and Abdu'l-Baha seemed to want to prolong it. When the luncheon was announced, Abdu'l-Baha led the way, and everyone followed him to the dining room, except Louis. All were seated when suddenly Abdu'l-Baha stood up, looked around, and then said to Mirza Khan, "Where is Mr. Gregory? Bring Mr. Gregory." There was nothing for Mirza Khan to do but to find Mr. Gregory, who fortunately had not left the house yet, but he was quietly waiting for a chance to do so. Finally, Mr. Gregory came into the room with Mirza Khan, and Abdu'l-Baha, who was really the host, as he was wherever he was, he had by this time rearranged the place setting and made room for Mr. Gregory, giving him the seat of honor at his right. He stated that he was very pleased to have Mr. Gregory there, and then in the most natural way, as if nothing unusual had happened, proceeded to give a talk on the oneness of mankind. So I want to tell you a little bit more about Louis Gregory's life. Mr. Gregory was born in Charleston, South Carolina, on June 6, 1874, less than a decade after his parents were freed from slavery. He belonged to the first generation of African Americans in the South to have a legal right to education. He attended state-run primary schools and later studied at private institutions established by white missionaries. He received a secondary education at Avery Normal Institute, which was the first high school for African Americans in Charleston to provide a college prep curriculum. He graduated in June 1891, shortly before his mother's death. Then he attended Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he earned a bachelor's degree in 1896. Then, after teaching for a few years at Avery, he decided to become a lawyer. But his choice of career required him to leave the South because the region offered African Americans no opportunities to study law. And in that time, which was the post-Reconstruction period, there was no possibility of employment in the legal field. So then in 1899, he enrolled in the School of Law at Howard University in DC. And he was one of 20 graduates, all male, in 1902. And he gave the commencement address, which was entitled "The Growth of Peace Laws," in which he focused on disarmament and international peace initiatives. He was admitted to the bar of DC in October 1902, and then the bar of the United States Supreme Court in March 1907. So Gregory practiced law in DC for 15 years, and for a while he was in partnership with another young Howard graduate, James A. Cobb, who later became assistant U.S. attorney in D.C. and a judge of the D.C. Municipal Court. Both men were considered rising stars in Washington's Black community. Beginning in 1904, Gregory then worked for a decade as a clerk at the United States Treasury Department, and he was promoted several times before he decided to return to full-time private practice. Disillusioned by the mistreatment of African Americans in the post-Reconstruction period, Gregory felt compelled to protest racial segregation and the infringement of civil rights. His ideas, as he later described them, were radical, and he was committed to a program of fiery agitation. Even though his mother and grandmother had been deeply religious, religion was no longer of any interest to him. He had been seeking, as he recalled later, but not finding the truth, he had given up. He first heard about the Baha'i faith actually from a Treasury Department coworker who was a white Southerner, and even though he wasn't interested in the religion for himself, he thought Gregory would be. But Gregory had no inclination to attend a religious meeting. But finally, in late 1907, he agreed. Pauline Hannon, who was also a white Southerner, welcomed him to the meeting with unusual warmth, telling him what he was about to hear would make possible a work that would bless humanity. The talk by Lua Getzinger, who was one of the first Western Baha'is, provided him a brief but vivid historical account of the religions of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, who was a prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. So Gregory was, really shocked, and his expectations were defied, and he was interested, and he accepted Pauline Hannon's invitation to study more about the religion. So then Pauline and her husband Joseph became his teachers and close friends. And for the next year and a half, he attended meetings in their home, and he was really impressed by their freedom from racial prejudice. He was attracted by their beliefs, but he was still held back by his agnosticism. But finally, as he later recalled, the Hannons pierced his mental veils by teaching him how to pray. So Gregory became a Baha'i in June 1909. It comes to me, he wrote to the Hannons a month later, that I have never taken occasion to thank you specifically for all your kindness and patience, which finally culminated in my acceptance of the great truths of the Baha'i revelation. It has given me an entirely new conception of Christianity and of all religion, and with it, my whole nature seems changed for the better. It is a sane and practical religion, which meets all the varying needs of life, and I hope I shall ever regard it as a priceless possession. So Gregory believed that in embracing this new faith, he wasn't setting aside his commitment to racial equality, and he wasn't distancing himself from those who were working for change, but instead he was refocusing himself and placing his concerns within a wider context, which was the establishment of a world order encompassing all people, and which was founded on faith in a supreme being and this vision for humanity. So one of Louis Gregory's first actions as a Baha'i actually was to confront what was the de facto segregation in the Washington, D.C. Baha'i community. Rather than being disillusioned by the disparity between Baha'is' proclaimed beliefs and their actions, which largely reflected the customary social practices of that time, he became an agent of change. So in early 1911, Gregory became the first African-American Baha'i to have the privilege of pilgrimage by the express invitation of Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah. Gregory traveled to Egypt, where Abdu'l-Baha was residing, and then he visited the Baha'i holy places in where is now the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel. This pilgrimage had this deep spiritual impact on Gregory, but it also gave Abdu'l-Baha time to stress to him the vital importance of bringing Black and white Americans together. Abdu'l-Baha said many wonderful things during my brief contact with him in Egypt, which lasted less than a fortnight, Gregory later recalled. But more than anything, his discourse was about the American race problem. When Gregory asked Abdu'l-Baha for his guidance, Abdu'l-Baha reiterated the wish that he had expressed in his first letter to Gregory, urging him to work for unity and humanity between the races. So then, in further defiance of convention, Abdu'l-Baha encouraged the marriage of Gregory and a white Englishwoman that you can see here, a Baha'i, Louisa Matthew. Her pilgrimage in 1911 had coincided with Gregory's, and so they had briefly met and become friends. And so even though Abdu'l-Baha had brought up the topic of intermarriage during their visit, he had told Gregory, if you have any influence to get the races to intermarry, it will be very valuable. But they said they only thought of each other as friends. But then when they met again in America, Abdu'l-Baha urged them to reconsider their relationship in a new light. Only then did the potential attachment he had sensed between them blossom into love. They were married in a quiet ceremony in New York City on September 27th, 1912, and they became the first interracial Baha'i couple at a time when interracial marriage in the United States defied popular scientific theories about the harmful effects of race mixing, and actually in much of the nation, it was still a criminal offense. So Abdu'l-Baha described the Gregorys as an introduction to the accomplishment of fellowship between the races. Even though the couple never had children of their own, they enriched the lives of many young people. And over the years, they became a particular source of strength to a growing number of interracially married couples among American Baha'is. So Gregory worked in 3 areas I want to highlight that were very important to promote the oneness of humankind. First, he devoted himself to teaching the Baha'i faith, particularly among African Americans. His efforts in DC immediately attracted the interest of a number of professionals and intellectuals, and the need to accommodate, these gatherings spurred the Washington Baha'is to reconsider their practices that had been based on racial prejudice and segregation, and to begin the long process of rooting out these prejudices. Even though it was, many years before the community overcame these overt racial barriers, Louis Gregory's activities as a new Baha'i led to the holding of some integrated meetings, which paved the way for many interracial gatherings during Abdu'l-Baha's visit. And the second field of his activity was Baha'i administration. Gregory was first elected in February 1911 to fill a vacancy on the Working Committee, which was the embryonic Baha'i administrative body in DC. And then in 1912, during the National Baha'i Convention attended by Abdu'l-Baha, Gregory was elected to the Executive Board of Baha'i Temple Unity, which was the governing body in North America at the time. So Gregory was so effective as an administrator that this kept him at the forefront for more than 3 decades. He was one of the few African Americans elected to national leadership in any interracial organization in the first half of the 20th century. And he served on the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the US for 14 years. Several times he received the highest or second highest number of votes. He filled a various number of roles, such as recording secretary, which he held for 6 years, and he actually helped to draft the bylaws of the National Spiritual Assembly of the US, which later actually became a model for NSAs all over the world. So then the third field of his contributions was the promotion of race unity. Both Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi had repeatedly called the attention of the American Baha'is to the importance of confronting racial prejudice, which Shoghi Effendi described as America's most vital and challenging issue. Gregory largely led the community's response. He was guided by Abdu'l-Baha's instruction to work for harmony between the races, and he learned many valuable lessons while tackling the challenges he saw in DC. So in the North, there were a lot of conferences and other activities which were either sponsored or co-sponsored by the Baha'is, and this resulted in a significant public role for the religion in the fields of race relations and civil rights. And these events provided a platform for the exchange of views by a lot of leaders, both Baha'is and not Baha'is, among them W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, William Stanley Braithwaite, Franz Boas, and some distinguished Baha'is such as Elaine Locke, Dorothy Baker, Matthew Bullock, and so on. So Gregory either served as publicist or organizer behind the scenes, and sometimes he actually assumed the role of chairperson or speaker. Then in the South, Gregory often attempted to overcome racial barriers. He spoke to a lot of racially mixed audiences on a number of occasions, and sometimes to white groups, including one time he shared the platform with a big group of the KKK. And just by associating with white Baha'is, especially women, he risked arrest or even lynching, but he was undeterred. One time he was visiting Miami, and he and 2 white women from the North had arranged this 21-person meeting. And at the end of his stay, the 3 of them had just taken off for a little sightseeing and a picnic on a beach that happened to be in the white section of the town. Afterward, a friend asked Gregory whether he realized that all the African Americans were praying for him, because not being from the area, he obviously failed to realize how dangerous it was to be seen with white women. Gregory replied that he was born and raised in the South and he knew its customs, but he found his protection in God. And he said, "If he does not hold me, I am unsafe anywhere." So many of Louis Gregory's white contemporaries really recognize him as a spiritual giant at a time when this kind of recognition by white people was really unheard of. People called him a source of shimmering radiance that was so remarkable that seemed to be part of him. Another Baha'i who Gregory had traveled with in the South recalled, "I never saw him show anger, impatience, or resentment. Instead, when met by hostility, Gregory seemed to search his innermost being and beyond for a solution to a change in the relationship." Martha Root, who was the outstanding international Baha'i teacher in the faith's first century, observed, "I always feel he is one of the greatest disciples of this new day." And Shoghi Effendi also had a lot of praise to give for him. Shoghi Effendi was the grandson of Abdul Baha, and at that time he was leading the faith administratively. And Shoghi Effendi often wrote letters to Louis Gregory on the themes of his spiritual distinction. At the midpoint of Gregory's life, Shoghi Effendi observed, "I feel impelled to reaffirm my deep sense of indebtedness to you for your magnificent work in the service of the faith of Baha'u'llah. No words of mine can pay adequate tribute to the spirit that glows within your breast, or to the determination that fires your soul in your unique and highly meritorious endeavors. You have attained spiritual heights that few indeed can claim to have scaled. You have displayed a spirit that few, if any, can equal." And Shoghi Effendi would later go on to tell Gregory that his letters to Shoghi Effendi were a huge source of inspiration and comfort. Shoghi Effendi said, "I'm always relieved by your letters from the burden of care and responsibility which often oppresses me. You hardly realize what a help you are to me in my arduous work." So although he was very active and involved up until the end of his life, he died suddenly at home on July 30th, 1951, and he was buried in Eliot, Maine. So after his death, Shoghi Effendi conferred on Gregory the rank of Hand of the Cause of God, which was a very high distinction that was given to very select Baha'is of that time to help lead the faith's efforts. And he was the 8th person and the 4th Westerner to be named so. After he died, Shoghi Effendi cabled the Baha'is of the United States, and he said, "Profoundly deplore grievous loss of dearly beloved, noble-minded, golden-hearted Louis Gregory. Keenly feel loss of one so loved, admired, and trusted by Abdul Baha. Deserves rank of first hand of the cause of his race." So in the US and around the world, Louis Gregory has been recognized for his achievements. His old friend and former law partner, Judge James Cobb, paid tribute to him as one of those who enriched the life of America. And Baha'is have named many institutions around the world in his honor, among them several schools in Africa and also the Louis Gregory Cottage, which is now at Greenacre, which is a Baha'i school in Eliot, Maine. And actually in 2003, his boyhood home in Charleston was dedicated as the first museum in the city to honor a particular individual and the first Baha'i-owned museum in the United States. So let me just stop sharing that. So the reason that I started off with this story is because it gives us so much hope, and it stands in stark contrast to the brutalities and horror that we've been witnessing recently. And I hope it can guide us and give us, some relief and some hope as we try to navigate this really sad reality we find ourselves in. And that reality is that racism is still alive and well. When I was preparing for this talk, I honestly felt a bit unqualified and out of place. I'm not an expert on racial issues in the US. I'm not out there right now on the front lines protesting. I'm not Black. I haven't actually felt the firsthand experiences of racial discrimination. But I realize that that's kind of the point. First of all, we don't need to be perfectly knowledgeable before we speak out. We don't need to have all the answers or even pretend to. And also, the onus to speak out against racism should not be on the Black community. I think that's been the problem for so long. Non-Black silence or inaction against injustice. So the responsibility of speaking out against racism needs to be on non-Black people, because it is we that have created the problem in the first place, or at least we continue to benefit from it and we allow it to perpetrate. So on February 23rd, we all saw Ahmaud Arbery, an unarmed 25-year-old Black man, fatally shot while jogging by 2 white residents who were armed and driving a pickup truck. And the event was recorded on video, thankfully, by a 3rd man, William Bryan, who was following Arbery in a 2nd vehicle. And then actually a few days ago on June 4th, additional evidence came forth that Travis McMichael, one of the shooters, had said the N-word while standing over Arbery's body. And then it was actually only after the video went viral, 74 days later, that the McMichaels were actually arrested. And many people have pointed out that they weren't arrested because the police and authorities saw the video. It was because we, the public, had seen the video. Then on March 13th, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old Black woman, was fatally shot by Louisville Metro Police Department officers. Officers had entered her apartment with no announcement because they had a no-knock warrant, and they were looking for drugs that apparently her boyfriend had, which never ended up actually being there. but gunfire was exchanged and she was shot 8 times and pronounced dead at the scene. And then recently on May 25th, we all witnessed the killing of George Floyd, 46-year-old Black man, where Derek Chauvin, who was a white police officer, knelt on his neck for over 8 minutes while he was arrested, handcuffed, face down on the street. And he had been arrested on suspicion of a counterfeit $20 bill. And Chauvin continued to place his knee on Floyd's neck, even though Floyd repeatedly said, "I can't breathe." He was calling out, "Mama," and "please." There are far too many other Black killings to even mention and do justice to here, but the killing of George Floyd has set off a series of protests and demonstrations across the US and now internationally. People are sick and tired of acts of violence, hatred, and racism against Black people. And even beyond that, people are outraged that the police, the very people who are charged to protect and serve the American people, are largely the ones inflicting this racially driven brutality against Black lives. I've heard some people say that they're surprised or shocked to hear of these acts of violence and racism in the year 2020. I mean, I agree that these actions are deplorable, sickening, vile, but to call them surprising indicates that we're somewhat naive or unaware of their prevalence. These problems are not new to the Black community. They have been feeling and experiencing them day in and day out, even though we haven't seen them on video. And only now, thankfully, with cell phone video technology, we actually have direct evidence of the very thing the Black community has been telling us for decades and centuries. And even with the video evidence, we still can't rely on proper authorities to condemn and punish these acts of racism. Shoghi Effendi, who is the guardian of the Baha'i faith, he wrote to the American Baha'i community in 1938, "As to racial prejudice, the corrosion of which for well nigh a century has bitten into the fiber and attacked the whole social structure of American society, it should be regarded as constituting the most vital and challenging issue confronting the Baha'i community at the present stage of its evolution." Even though these words were written over 80 years ago, we see that as a nation, we're still facing this very same issue. But really, at its core, what is racism? Where does it actually stem from? Well, at a fundamental level, it's the erroneous and damaging belief that there's any real difference between human beings at an intrinsic level. It's a shunning of the belief of unity and oneness of humankind. And it's honestly a desperate and futile attempt to raise up one category of individuals over another based on something as superficial as the level of pigment in one's skin. In 1989, the Baha'i International Community, in its statement to the 45th session of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, asserted, "Just as fever is a symptom of disease in the body, racism is a symptom of disease in society. Suppressing the symptom does not cure the disease, but curing the disease eliminates the symptom." The Baha'i International Community is convinced that the disease from which society currently suffers is failure to recognize the principle of the oneness of humanity, and racism is but a symptom. If we wish to eliminate racism entirely, we must establish as the moral foundation for society the unshakable conviction of the oneness of the human race. So these words are especially pertinent in light of the widespread protests that have now been occurring. Many of our government leaders are scrambling to try to figure out how to stop these protests, and ironically, many times they use force. And they wonder, how can we end this civil strife? Well, like the Baha'i International Community stated, this racism and the protests that have stemmed as a reaction against it, these are symptoms of the disease. The disease is racism, and people are not going to rest until that disease is cured. And at a basic level, the way to cure this disease is by firmly establishing the unity of all people as the moral foundation of our society. Abdu'l-Baha stated, "God is the shepherd of all, and we are his flock. There are not many races, there is only one race." So what does this phrase, "there is only one race," mean? Well, as scientific technology has advanced, geneticists have come to find that there's actually no such thing as race from a scientific standpoint. A 2018 article in Scientific American said that there is a broad scientific consensus that when it comes to genes, there's just as much diversity within racial and ethnic groups as there is across them. And the Human Genome Project has confirmed that the genomes found across the globe are 99.9% identical in every person. So the very idea of different races is nonsense. And anthropologists also agree that there are no major complex behaviors that directly correlate with what might be considered human racial characteristics. There is no inherent relationship between intelligence, law-abidingness, economic practices, and race. So race is not a biological reality, not a social reality, but it's really a myth. So does the phrase "there's only one race" mean that we shouldn't see color? Because I see a lot of people saying we just shouldn't see color. We shouldn't even see that difference. But I don't think this is the case. Abdu'l-Baha said, "Consider the world of created things, how varied and diverse they are in species, yet with one sole origin. All the differences that appear are those of outward form and color. This diversity of type is apparent throughout the whole of nature. Behold, a beautiful garden full of flowers, shrubs, and trees. Each flower has a different charm, a peculiar beauty, its own delicious perfume and beautiful color. The trees too, how varied are they in size and growth and foliage, and what different fruits they bear. Yet all these flowers, shrubs, and trees spring from the self-same earth. The same sun shines upon them, and the same clouds give them rain. So it is with humanity. It is made up of many races, and its peoples are of different color, but they all come from the same God, and all are servants to him. The diversity in the human family should be the cause of love and harmony, as it is in music, where many different notes blend together in the making of a perfect chord. If you meet those of different race and color from yourself, do not mistrust them and withdraw into your shell of conventionality, but rather be glad and show them kindness. Think of them as different colored roses growing in the beautiful garden of humanity, and rejoice to be among them. Baha'u'llah has drawn the circle of unity. He has made a design for the uniting of all the peoples, and for the gathering of them all under the shelter of the tent of universal unity. This is the work of the divine bounty, and we must all strive with heart and soul until we have the reality of unity in our midst. And as we work, so will strength be given unto us. Leave all thought of self and strive only to be obedient and submissive to the will of God. In this way only shall we become citizens of the kingdom of God and attain unto life everlasting." So I want to share another story about Abdu'l-Baha during his stay in New York, which illustrates the fact that he wasn't colorblind, but rather he found racial differences a thing of beauty. So Abdu'l-Baha in New York City, he was on his way to speak to several hundred men at the Bowery Mission, and he was accompanied by a group of Persian and American friends. And not unnaturally, a group of boys was suddenly intrigued by the sight of this group of Persians with their flowing robes and turbans, and so they started to follow them. But soon the boys became noisy and difficult to control. And a lady in Abdu'l-Baha's party was highly embarrassed, and she went and she talked to the boys and she tried to explain to them who Abdu'l-Baha was. And she invited them. She didn't think they're actually going to take her up on her invitation, but she invited them to her home the following Sunday and said, "If you want to see Abdu'l-Baha, we can make arrangements for that." So then on Sunday, some 20 or 30 of them appeared on her doorstep, and they were a little scruffy, but it seemed that they had kind of tidied up for the occasion nonetheless. And Abdu'l-Baha came to the door and he greeted each boy with a hand clasp or an arm around the shoulder with warm smiles and boyish laughter. And his happiest welcome seemed to be directed to the 13-year-old boy near the end of the line. He had the deepest color skin and he didn't seem too sure he'd be welcome. But Abdu'l-Baha's face lit up, and in a loud voice that everyone could hear, he exclaimed, "Here is a black rose." The boy's face was just shining with happiness and love. And silence fell across the room as the boys looked at their companion with a new awareness. Master didn't stop at that though. He had this big box of 5-pound chocolate that he asked to be brought, and he gave a handful to each boy. But finally, with only a few left in the box, he found the darkest colored chocolate, and he walked over to the boy and he placed it next to his cheek. And he was just radiant as he lovingly put his arm around the boy's shoulders, and with a humorous glance, he glanced around the room and didn't say anything else. So as we see these injustices taking place today, it's really easy for us to feel helpless or out of control. We wonder, how can we even begin to help dismantle this huge, centuries-long system of racism? I always am reminded of this quote by Shoghi Effendi. He says, "We cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Man is organic with the world. His inner life molds the environment and is itself also deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, And every abiding change in the life of man is the result of these mutual reactions. So I think this is really true. In order to create long-lasting change, we need both individual and societal change simultaneously. At the individual level, we need to emphasize the importance of spiritual education, especially for children, because we know that those are the formative years where someone's identity and belief system gets shaped. And in order to do that, honestly, we need to develop true friendship with those from other races and ethnicities. It reminds me of this story about Abdu'l-Baha. He was living in a Paris hotel for a while, and among those who used to come to see him was this poor Black man. He wasn't a Baha'i, but he loved Abdu'l-Baha very much. One day when the man came, someone told him that management didn't like to have him there, a poor Black man, because it wasn't consistent with the standards of the hotel. So the poor man went away. But when Abdu'l-Baha learned of this, he sent for the man responsible, and he said, "You have to find my friend." He was not happy that he was turned away. Abdu'l-Baha said, "I did not come to see expensive hotels or furnishings, but to meet my friends. I did not come to Paris to conform to the customs of Paris, but to establish the standard of Baha'u'llah." So I really urge all of us, even long after these protests are over and this media coverage subsides, to really try to form genuine, loving friendships from people who look different from us, to encourage our children to do so, to encourage our family, our coworkers, our friends, because that's really the way we can learn and grow with each other. And I urge us to really speak out and have those difficult conversations, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with someone of your own family who has, unfortunately still racist beliefs. And we need to stand up for it, even in these moments when no one's watching us and it's not on social media, no one's congratulating us, no one's patting us on the back. It needs to be done in these small micro ways on a daily basis. What I find interesting is that Baha'u'llah actually used to refer to Black people as the pupil of the eye. Abdu'l-Baha explained that Baha'u'llah once compared Black people to the pupil of the eye surrounded by the white. And in this Black pupil is seen the reflection of that which is before it, and through it, the light of the spirit shineth forth. So if we know a little bit about how the eye works, the pupil is actually how the light gets transmitted into the eye. And I also love this metaphor because Baha'u'llah is basically saying that the pupil is essential for light, and without the pupil, someone's blind. So humanity needs this light, and only Black people can provide it. So we know that individual change is one half of the puzzle, but the other half is institutional and societal change. Because even with individual transformation, there are certain structural changes that need to take place in order to systematize this transformation and also provide people with legal rights and remedies. For example, many people, I don't know if you've heard, have started to learn about the concept of qualified immunity for police officers. So basically, qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that makes it pretty much impossible to sue police officers for abuse, excessive force, and misconduct. Qualified immunity makes it so that victims can't win against cops unless they find a prior case almost exactly like theirs. So just a couple examples. This past November, the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals held that Tennessee cops who allowed their police dog to bite a surrendered suspect did not violate clearly established law. There, the victim cited a case where the same court earlier held that it was unconstitutional for officers to put their dog on a suspect who had surrendered by lying on the ground with his hands to the side. But that was not sufficient, the court reasoned, because the victim here had not surrendered by lying down. He had surrendered by sitting on the ground and raising his hands. And then in February this year, the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals held that a Texas prison guard who had pepper sprayed an inmate in his locked cell, admittedly for no reason, he did not violate clearly established law because a similar cited case involved guards who had hit and tased inmates for no reason, not pepper sprayed them for no reason. So in both of these cases, the officers were granted qualified immunity. And it's actually interesting looking into this doctrine. It was first invoked in a 1967 Supreme Court case, Pearson versus Ray, and it was invoked to shield white police officers from a lawsuit they had faced for enforcing segregation. They had actually arrested a group of Black clergymen who were peacefully protesting by sitting in a whites-only waiting room in a Mississippi bus station. And today, this doctrine continues to be used to protect officers who engage in horrific acts of abuse, often towards people of color. And later cases just kept expanding the scope of qualified immunity and further eroded police accountability. So qualified immunity, ending it, is one of the necessary steps towards reducing police violence and increasing accountability. And even though this seems like it's outside of our realm of influence, there are ways we can get involved. First of all, we can just help by spreading awareness of this issue to people we know. And also, currently, legislation is being proposed in both the House and the Senate that would help end or limit qualified immunity. And we can contact our representatives and voice our support and demand that they support this. But there's also so much other structural change that needs to take place. For example, there needs to be better training for police officers, especially with issues of race. There needs to be better education in our public schools, showing how racism still operates today. It's not something that happened centuries ago. It's still operating today. And even though we feel like maybe we can't personally contribute to each of these endeavors, we all have our own sphere of influence, whether it's in our work, our family life, our friend life. There's always a way we can contribute. And actually, one of the most important ways we can contribute is by voting, especially at the local level, which is where people largely ignore it. But when we vote for judges, mayors, city officers, councilmen, so on, these are the people who are actually shape most of these practices that affect our local communities. So this is one way we can directly get involved. Almost 60 years ago, in his letter from a Birmingham jail to his fellow clergymen, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." So honestly, today what gives me hope is that our nation, our world is slowly but surely waking up to this reality. I mean, first we had the pandemic, which has really given us a sense of how interconnected and interdependent we are as a world. And then now with these instances of injustice coming to light, the people who were just content to be in their spheres of safety and complacency, they're realizing that people aren't going to stand for the status quo anymore, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to all of us. And as Dr. King further wrote, which I think this is really relevant to today, he said, "You deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, but your statement, I'm sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I'm sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes. It's unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate that the city's white power structure left the Negro community with no alternative." So I think these words honestly couldn't ring truer at the moment, and we need to grapple with the root cause, like I said, instead of focusing on these outward protests, which are just a symptom. So with that, I thank all of you for your time, and I now invite you all for questions or comments so we can consider how we can start actually grappling with this issue in our daily lives. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Paymaneh, for that wonderful talk. Going over to questions now. All right, Emmanuel, I'll see you have your hand up. I will unmute you now for the question.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation. I learned a lot about the life of Louis Gregory. Thank you so much. Actually, I don't have a question, but just a comment, which is not from me, but from African-American friends and colleagues at work who are from Africa or of the Black race. All of them, they were telling me, don't talk with us about unity, because before we can talk about unity, we have to work on social justice. Until then, I mean, we cannot talk about unity. That's just some food for thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that some just talking about empty unity and oneness can seem a little like not really addressing the root problem, which is, yeah, that's why I think we really need to get involved directly, both individually and like on a wider level, like I said. But yeah, good point.
All right. The next question comes from a group chat. Paymaneh, John, how long did it take you to prepare this talk? I'm amazed.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to do like some research to get everything right. But yeah, I just felt like, honestly, like this is such an important moment that speaking out on this is like a big responsibility, and like we have to do our research. So hopefully I was able to provide some info.
All right. No more questions in the comment section right now. And I am not seeing any hands raised, right? Oh, next question, Ryan Nor. Do you have any examples of what you have done in your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, not to get too personal, but like I even have members of my extended family who unfortunately, they either dismiss the protest or they try to shift blame on the victim. All the things we've heard, like, oh, he wasn't a church boy, he had this and this, oh, maybe he was on drugs, all these comments that really, again, shifting blame away from the people that deserve it. So honestly, I think those kind of conversations are the hardest to have because it's uncomfortable with people that you're like closely related to have to talk about that stuff. But that's one way. Another way is, this seems kind of far out, but I mean, I'm working on studying for the bar exam, and hopefully as a lawyer, I can, help do pro bono cases or represent people who are facing problems like this. And then just through education and talking to my friends also, I think is one step. But I mean, there's also so much more we can all do.
Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any more hands raised, and I'm not seeing any more questions in the commenting section. So, with that,
I think we have one more question from Kashima. If you can unmute her.
I don't see it. Yeah. Kashima. Kioma.
I think I just unmuted her.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So I am so happy I joined today. I wanted to thank you for the information and also for your passion. And I'm so glad you brought up, the human race, because I think sometimes when people hear, the human race, they try to disqualify that we're all unique. We're all, we're colorblind, if you will. So I'm glad that we can still acknowledge that we are one, but we also have our differences, and that's okay to acknowledge. The other thing that I guess I was actually verbalizing to some friends of mine is my concern, and I want to believe that those who do not look like me are sincere. As far as, jumping on the BLM movement, protesting, but my concern is the sincerity of it all. That worries me because I don't know if some of these folks are in it for the long run. So I guess it's not necessarily a question for you, but I mean, I think time will, will show itself as far as who's really there for the long run. But I have been seeing a lot of people that have been outwardly racist. Like, I don't know if people are doing it for attention. I don't know if everyone else has been seeing that as well, but I've been seeing some pretty disturbing racist comments. So I appreciate that you said, like, kind of calling people out if they're saying insensitive things, because we have to challenge these things. And I think there's a group on Facebook. It's something about racism, like kind of outing racists. So they'll put up, their picture with the racist comment they said, and if they own a business and so forth, people can know what's going on. So what other tactics do you think we can do to tackle or should we not necessarily be shifting that focus on those who maybe we can't necessarily change? Should our focus be more on those who on the surface appear to really be with us? That was kind of a big question.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree that like when we see these like outward really like weird and rude comments, we need to confront them. But at the same time, I wonder like how much is that person really open to change or not? And are we just better? Because there are a lot of well-meaning white and non-Black people who are really like looking to be allies, but maybe they're not sure how, or they're not that informed on the issues. I feel like maybe that's a better use of our time in the long run, because there are a lot of people who do want to join us in this effort. So yeah, and I mean, and in regards to the social media thing, I also have been wondering about that and messaging some of my friends, like, I hope this isn't just a fad and a trend. Like, I really hope once people are aware of this, they're actually going to implement it, even when this isn't like a huge issue, this isn't talked about a lot. Like, I really hope people carry it forward. So I guess we can only hope for the best.
Thank you.
All right, we got a couple more hands raised and some group chat questions now. So I'm coming over from Farzad for the hand raise. You are
I think,
Farzad, you're unmuted now.
yes, I think before me there's a someone doesn't know how to use the sign for the hand, so he had his hand up. I believe it's Farid Elmi. Let him talk. He's mute.
What was that again?
Farid Elmi, he's trying to get your attention. You need to unmute him. Did you see him?
Yep. All right, Farid, you're unmuted now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Farid.
Hello, friends. Thank you very much for your nice talk. Yeah, I knew about Mr. Gregory, but you gave me much more information about him. Also, I learned from Abdul Baha. He said, when the friends meet, they must feel like they are a thirsty fellow who reaches to the very clear water, how they can embrace and how they joyful to see each other. But when I came to America, I went to one of the meetings. When I say Allah Abha, as if they don't know me, how this fellow greets me. It was a little bit awkward for me. I hope at least the Baha'i friends will study Abdul Baha's writings or Shobi Effendi or Baha'u'llah and show their love for each other, even if they don't know each other. I remember my past father, God bless his soul, and all who are past this world, bless their soul. When somebody knocked at our door and he went to open the door, he wouldn't say, "What do you want?" Before anything else, he would say, "Please come in, please come in." And even the fellow was getting astonished. Why? He doesn't know me, and he doesn't even ask me what I want. I knock his door, and then he would insist, "Please come in, please come in. Sit, have a cup of tea with me," and then you say what you want. So like that, we grow in that atmosphere. But when we come to the public and we don't see what Abdul Baha teaches us or what Baha'u'llah teaches us, it's a little bit heartbreaking. Sorry if I say something negative, but this is what it is, you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of work still to be done, and we have to show that genuine friendship. Just in the interest of time, I think we have some more questions. So
Yeah, we'll do one more raised hand, and I'll jump to the comments chat section. Yeah. Raised hand next to me, Rain and Lily.
Yes. Hi, my name is Rain. I just joined. So I didn't hear. I wasn't able to hear the beginning, but I did catch a few comments. So what I would like to say in regards is, you know, most of us have experienced some type of discrimination, whether it be race, religion, sexual orientation, you know, political views, you know, is the discrimination. So as I say something, when people are as opposed to the question of, we hope that this is not a trend. Is this a trend, right? Well, the people that are unsensitive, I don't think that we should try to change their mind, because when we try to change their mind, it makes them more, they reject you more. When you bring if you talk about whether it be political or voting, oh no, you're this, you vote for this party or this party, it's discriminatory. When you talk about people's race, it's discriminatory. You know what I'm saying? I don't think, but when you bring it up to people as, other than it being a white and black thing, as opposed to because remember, the Jews was in concentration camps, it's not only the black people who have been discriminated against. So I think that when someone doesn't share the same view as we do, we just should express love back to them, right? And because people, I think, don't learn more by you telling them, because if it goes against what they feel in their heart. But if you can show them different, then that will change their mind. Because if you have an example of a white family and a black family, and these two children get together and they get married, right? And the white family doesn't like the black family, or the black family, they just on their kid. When they have their grandkids, they want to see their grandkids. Then they get to know the other party of the other race. And then they see, well, guess what? He's really not that bad, or she's really not that bad. And then in turn, they have a change of heart. So I think that we just have to express love and show love to another person that has that, I would call it wickedness or not pleasant, heart. At that moment, they don't have that sensitivity. At that moment, they don't have that love that they need to have, it, that they should have, and show it. But I think that love overpowers hate. So when we come to people and we express love and affection, and we have to, teach them. And how do you teach them? You lead by example. So when you lead by example, you see somebody, stealing something, you don't lecture them, say, you thief, because guess what? Maybe they want to hear that. But if you say, when you take from somebody, it may be their last, and it hurts them and it breaks them down, then they end up in a worse situation, and get them to show feel it and show compassion. And then maybe the next time when they go to steal something, they won't do it. You know what I'm saying? They won't do it because you already planted that seed in their mind and in their conscience. And then they can learn, more. Like the person who spoke before me, he said he doesn't see that in the world. This is what his teachings are, and he doesn't see that in the world. But you know what? If he continues to show love and be loving towards people, and they'll look at him and they'll say, wow, that's a really awesome and loving guy. And they will strive more to be like him. That's just my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm long-winded.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Especially it reminds me of this quote by Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah. He says, look at me, follow me, be as I am. So he says, basically, actions speak louder than words. And I agree, we can just talk about it all day, but really, I think the best way is, like you said, lead by example and become friends with people who don't have your life experience, who don't look like you. That's really, once someone knows people personally, then they can actually associate these problems with real people they know. So yeah, it's a good reminder not to get so hostile, because talking about, oh, you're Republican, you're Democrat, vote for this, do that. At the end of the day, people are going to have these really entrenched views, and trying to just be hostile and argumentative is.
And the reason why I had expressed, like I said, political, the reason why, because I wanted to take which I don't know if it was appropriate or not, but I wanted to take the view of race. I wanted to show that we have all been discriminated in some way, whether it be race, religion, sexual orientation, or anything else. We have all been discriminated. Even the rich and the poor were discriminated against. And then so, like you said, we have to lead by example, because if you don't, and you get into a debate, you're no better than them. And then it makes them more angry, and they have a reason not to like you, a reason to be angry with you. Don't give them a reason. Well, you know what? I love you anyway, and keep going. And then have wow, it'll make them think. So we have to lead by example. And then maybe, I think leading by example will change the world. Thank you.
So true. I have nothing else to add to that. Yep, I totally agree.
All right, coming over to my next question. I'm going down to the Zoom group chat. Question from Bridget White. What can we do as individuals to support social justice according to the faith? What are some ideas? Should we write to our Congress members, for example? Support a nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, those are all good examples. Like I said, you can, like one thing, the qualified immunity issue, you can write to your Congress member and tell them you support it. I mean, I had interned for a member of Congress a few years ago, and it does matter the amount of people who support a certain thing. It does matter. It does get counted in their system. So you can do that. Voting at the local level, especially voting on the national level. There's so many places you can donate. I mean, I don't have a link now, but there are so many like Black organizations. You can also support Black-owned businesses. I think the economic part of it is also a huge thing. And then in terms of the spiritual aspects, like I said, you know, we need to develop these moral qualities, especially in children, and teach them from a young age. Love, compassion, like all these stories we talked about how, you know, the human race is like one garden. I really think the individual part is so important too.
All right, coming down to the next question from David Troutman. Thank you for a wonderful presentation, Paymaneh. Are we as Baha'is free of race prejudice in your view? Does our Baha'i community today seem fully racially integrated?
That's an interesting question. I mean, from the story I gave in Louis Gregory in the beginning, at that time, the DC Baha'is over 100 years ago, they still weren't integrated in the beginning, even outwardly. Like a lot of their meetings were held separately. That just shows how much the society, the culture of the society influences even a group of people who say they believe in it. So today, I think we are outwardly fully integrated. I mean, I think Baha'i gatherings I've attended are one of the most diverse places I've gone to. Now, what's in people's hearts? I don't know. I can't speak to that. I mean, hopefully we are all working towards rooting it out. And I think all of us, to some degree, have some sort of prejudice, even if it's not racial, if it's economic, if it's gender-based, if it's anything like that. So I mean, obviously we need to go further because as we see, it's not finished. And I don't think we can claim it's all done. We need to, especially, I think, look at our own cultures that we all come from, because Baha'is are the second most widespread religion in the world. So we come from all different countries, and each country has their own culture and belief system. So I think we all need to confront that and think about that too.
Okay.
I think Maheen Yazdani had wanted to unmute herself, so maybe you can unmute her next.
Yeah, I was getting ready to get down there. Sorry. Yeah, maybe now.
I think now you can. Yeah, thank you so much. It was excellent talk. You touched on all the aspects of the Baha'i and non-Baha'i aspects of the race issues. I just wanted to bring to your attention Mr. Farid Elmi. He was trying to catch attention. I think he was probably the same thing. He couldn't unmute himself. And anyway, that's all. I just wanted to thank you for that. Thank
you. Yeah, hopefully we've prevented people from unmuting themselves just so it doesn't get crazy, but hopefully everyone, if you just raise your hand or in the chat.
Yeah, we did. I mean, he was, there he is.
Yeah.
He raised them, I raised them, you know.
Yeah.
It's my first time using
so
this system, so I just didn't see it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Coming down for next question in the comment section from David Troutman. What are our responsibilities as Baha'is?
Can you expand on that? Like,
yeah, unmute him real quick.
Yeah, unmute.
Can you unmute him? I can't find him in the participant section.
No, I can't find him, but I think our responsibilities, I mean, a lot of them I've touched on. Maybe we can go to some more specific questions just in the interest of time.
Coming down, next question from Payman Achavan. Do you feel that in society we are sometimes asymptomatic because of our surroundings and how races are presented? We have traces of racism that we don't even realize, and we really have to work hard on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Back to the thing I was saying about like our society, when I served at the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel, a few years ago, it was Baha'is from all over the world who had come there, in addition to Israeli and Arab employees. And it was really, honestly, it was really difficult. It was the first time I had really worked with people from actual different cultures. Everywhere. Like my roommates were German, Ethiopian, Canadian, and then American, me. Even that is really hard. We all have different ways of communicating. Sometimes one culture is very direct and blunt, and that's how they talk. One culture is very sensitive, and they use more kind words, or especially on like the management team I was on, different work styles, different habits. What time do you work? How do you communicate with other people? So I think that like really getting these immersive experiences of actually like working with other people from like truly different cultures, it shows you that sometimes when you live, I've lived in America my whole life, you just think that's it, and it's really easy also to just isolate yourself from, we know neighborhoods are still very segregated, like in terms of race. So it's really easy to just go a lot of your life without actually confronting people of different cultures. So yeah, I agree that we all have some traces of like the way we've been conditioned, and like we just really have to work on finding out what that is. I also think Q Maraz Yazdani was trying to like raise his hand, maybe. I unmuted you so you can ask your question. Actually, sorry, for some reason it's not.
Oh
yeah.
Friends.
Hello. Hi.
I enjoyed your talk. Several years ago, I attended a meeting in Hazirat al-Quds, and Mr. Khan, who was a member of Universal House of Justice, was giving a talk. Very interesting talk. And he taught me something very interesting. He said, like and dislike is something which is in the heart. So some people like something and some people don't like something. But as long as they don't show and they follow what Baha'u'llah has told us to do, show kindness, meekness, friendship, equality, mercy, love, as long as we go that way, it's acceptable. But there are things in our heart, in certain people's heart, that you cannot change those things. We are not supposed to show any evidence for discrimination or dislike towards any human being. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, reading about these wonderful qualities is easy, but we have to actually act like it. Even when we don't feel like it, we feel tired or frustrated, we actually have to show forth love, even when we're met by people who might be very angry or hostile. So
we have to work on it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think we have a few more hands.
Yeah, they're not showing up on my screen, so if you're seeing them.
Oh, I'm seeing some hands. Okay, I see Rain and Lily, so I will unmute you. Sorry, it's taking a while.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I had raised my hand again.
Oh.
But I will make a comment anyway, because I was thinking, you're absolutely right. Some people don't have it in their heart. But again, I will say this again, that it's not in their heart, but doesn't mean that they can't have a change of heart. what we must continue to do for one another is prayer. Okay? Prayer changes things. You know, I'm a Christian. I'm not from the same religion as you guys, but you know, I serve God in Lord Jesus Christ, and God shows us grace and mercy, and He showed us love. You know, and we have commandments to follow, and we follow His commandments. And like you said, we shouldn't discriminate against anyone, but prayer is our direct communication with God. And when we pray, prayer changes things. We have to continue to pray, and we have to pray for other people. And you know what? Their heart, believe it or not, it will be changed. It may not be changed today. It may not be changed tomorrow. But maybe they'll go through a situation where they now have a change of heart. For instance, there was a video that surfaced on the internet, right? And this lady, like, she had this whole performance, like she had, you know, just because the guy had told her, you know, please put your dog on a leash because those are the rules of the park. And she got really angry with him. And she, on camera, I'm going to call the police on you and tell them that, you know, you were doing something to me and my dog, you know. And she was like really performing. And I don't want to think that because of the treatment that she received during social media and lost her job, I don't want to think that that changed her. I want to believe that what changed her was she saw how she behaved on the internet. That once she saw her behavior, you know what I'm saying? That helped her to change. No different than our children when they go into stores, they throw tantrums, right? But if you videotape them throwing a tantrum and then show them, they feel embarrassed. And I want to believe that she felt embarrassed and ashamed of herself, and how could she treat another person like that? And not only that, was now she got, I don't want to say a taste of home medicine because I don't, you know, but I want to say she got to experience rejections. Like this man was being rejected from people, from her. She got to feel rejected from other people, and she didn't like it. And she said, you know what, to herself, I should not be like that towards people because I didn't like how it was done to me. You know, we are taught, even as kids, the Bible says, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And when we go to school, we're taught, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, which is the same thing, right? So when you treat others the way you want to be treated and they notice you, then they can't be discriminatory of amongst you anymore, or what they had against you. If it was you being African American, you know what? This person's not like that. And maybe there's other people who's African American that's not like that. And maybe if I gave them a chance, I would see it, you know? So I will say this to the end. Let us just keep showing love. Let us continue to pray. And don't allow, whatever faith you're in, don't allow anyone to change that. Yes, we're not seeing this exemplified in the world, but you know what? We're not supposed to behave like the world behaves. We are our own individuals, okay? And yes, does it make us angry? Yes. Does it make us upset? Yes. But you know what? Just understand that your feelings are valid, okay? And know that they're valid, but it's how you react which is most important. And so for us to go out and break store windows is unacceptable. For us to go out and loot, that's unacceptable. For us to see our neighbors who are of different races, religions, sexual orientation, everything. You know, some people are even sexist against women, you know, just being a woman, they don't like you, you know? So just understand that we did not create ourselves, okay? And when we were created with love, okay? With love. And since we was created with love, and we have to let the light of the Lord shine through us to show everyone else. And don't be like them. Be angry, right? But don't be violent. Be angry, but don't respond like them. Take deep breaths, relax yourself, and pray, and continue to pray and be better. Try to be better. Try to be better. You might have to turn off the TV. But just know, you know what I do? I said, you know what, Lord? I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to be like that person. I want to be better. And if I'm like them, please change that. Change that in me. Because what I saw in them, if I'm like that, I don't want to be like that. And that's what I'm working on right now. And my daughter at night, we pray. You know, I use foul language. And while we were praying, you know what she said to God? God, please take that bad language from my mommy. Wow. Wasn't that amazing? Lord, please take that from me. I don't want to be like that. I'm a reflection. My daughter sees that and she didn't like it. And I'm like, wow, you know? So if I was using foul language, you know, in this meeting and someone else said, that language is inappropriate, you know, I might have been like, who are you to tell me how to talk? You see how that's angry and it's not pleasant, right? But when you come to someone with love, she came to me with love. Please take that away from my mommy. Guess what? You're right. That's not how I behave. Is inappropriate and it's not loving. And I need to be better.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, like, on the one hand, I don't want to tell people how to react because it's like really not my place. But at the same time, I agree that, you know, we do it, as hard as it may be, like, we have to respond with love, because that's what we're trying to fight against is racism and brutality. We can't respond with more hatred. So yeah, it's just a journey that we all have to see, even in our own lives, how we're doing that. So
thank you. Thank you. Now, I don't know how to put my hand down.
Oh, I'll do it for you. No worries. There you go.
Thank you.
So I think there's a couple other questions. I think Ryan said that Hillary has a remark. I don't see a hand from Hillary.
Hillary dropped off. I was going to call her next.
Oh, okay.
And then
I see a couple other hands from Emmanuel and Farzad Sanami. Do you see that, Stephen?
Yeah.
Thank you for unmuting me. Appreciate it.
No problem.
So I just want to give a comment and thank everyone for participating and giving and sharing their views. And I enjoyed listening to everyone. And it looks like, and it is, that we are all in the same wavelength. We're all thinking the same way. We are trying to help each other to do something about the situation. And we are fortunate enough as Baha'is, we have the blueprint, we have the writings of Baha'u'llah, we have the example of Abdu'l-Baha, which our beloved speaker talked about Abdu'l-Baha and the way he did it in Paris and other places. We have a whole book about Abdu'l-Baha's life and stories. And so to bring it together is that we have an example of Baha'is doing towards race unity, what they've been doing since the birth of the faith. So these are the examples that we have to follow, and just we don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. We have it, and we've seen that our close friends are doing it. All we have to do, as the wonderful young lady just before me, she said, you have to, even though you don't understand it, but see it's good, just follow it. And just to share with you about, I used to live in South Africa. And about 50 years before I went to South Africa, William Sears, the Hand of the Cause of God, went there around about 90 years ago. And during that time, there was an apartheid system. Nobody noticed Hand of the Cause. William Sears. Nobody knew when he came and when he left, but the impact that he did on that the South African communities, what we see today. When he started living the life as a Baha'i and bringing the African Americans Africans one by one to his house and teaching them the faith. He didn't go out and shout and scream about race unity. He didn't do any of those. What he did, he took one by one. He brought them in. He taught them the faith. He befriended them. And you should read his stories. Some of them are funny stories because at one time he had about 10 African in his house, and the police would show up to see what are they doing there in the middle of the night in the White House, in the person who's white. And William Sears would have asked them, he gave them some tasks to do. They had to be in the kitchen. Somebody had to get a vacuum cleaner to vacuum the house because he could tell the police that these are my servants. These are people working for me, and I'm allowed to have servants. So in that way, in that difficult time, he taught the Africans one by one. He didn't go out and give a good speech and a great speech. Even though he's a great speaker, he was a radio announcer, but he did it in a quiet time, in a lot of pressure. Fortunately, we don't have pressure in America. We can be loud as we can be as friendly as we can, but let's start by ourselves. Farid Elmi said, and many other friends that I'm listening to, and I cannot recall the names, forgive me for that, but let's start from ourselves. As our dear speaker said, that she started from her own. She started from her own family and trying to educate her own family or members that they are against or for it. But let's start from ourselves, and let's start with making a friend, either Baha'i, non-Baha'i, whoever is close to us, and let it grow from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I so agree. Especially I was thinking about some people have been saying like, why are you not posting on social media? Why are you not posting here? It's like, I think the true long-term change comes from those who move in silence. You know, people who move in silence are really the ones who are actually genuinely implementing these changes in their life, not the ones who are going and talking about it and screenshotting how much they donated. It's the people who are not talking about it, who are actually trying to form friendships and talk to people. That's like really the only way that we can have that long-term change.
If we have time for a couple more questions, I see Farid Elmi raising the hand. So.
Maybe we can just have one more question since we're like at time, but yeah.
Hi, Farid.
Thank you for giving me another chance. Excuse me, I have two questions. One is, why they call the African American when they are not calling others like European American or British American or I don't know what. And the second is, when I was in Botswana, I asked a friend, why they call you Bushmen? He said, this is what the Europeans call us, what we can do. You know, what in my Persian language, Bushman, or in even Hindi, they call it Jangli, means you are from the jungle or a person who has no civilization. And also, yeah, this is my question, please you answer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about like words we use. I mean, I think, you know, on the one hand, we're all American, so we're just American. But, you know, why do we call ourselves Iranian American or Chinese American? I mean, it's also, I think, important to distinguish. We do come from different ethnicities, and, you know, we do have differences. But on the other hand, I think, yeah, the language you use has to also be inclusive. Like we always, through history, have had this idea of us and the other. There's always an other, you know, not like us. And we sometimes classify people as not, oh, they're that kind of American. That I'm a true American, but that's that kind of American. So I agree that we also just need to be mindful of having more inclusive language, but we also should still acknowledge our differences and our racial differences and our different backgrounds at the same time. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, can I, since I'm on mute, I just want to say, I had a conversation yesterday with a very close friend of mine who is a Baha'i, but she comes from Ethiopia. And the discussion went on, and she said, I said, but they keep saying African American. And Abdul Baha uses black. And I've seen the writings of letters from Universal House of Justice or the National Spiritual Assembly using the word black. And I think we should, again, I'm referring back to this speaker's, what she mentioned about we need to, we're not colorblind. Baha'is, we're not colorblind. We acknowledge the ethnicity of the person, we acknowledge the color of that person, we appreciate it. And we love to have that. And so my friend was telling me that when she hears African American, she feels that she's excluded from that. And she said, as an Ethiopian in America, I've been subject to discrimination. So when they say African American, now they change the direction to only African Americans. And as you see the riots or the unrest is going on, they want to make sure that you follow their guideline. You cannot derail their motives. You cannot hijack their motive. This is the problem. We have seen it now. We need to fix it. So we need to recognize each other as what we are. So it is important to, as Abdullah said, if you are a black, we appreciate you, we love you, and it's a beautiful color. If you're white, we appreciate you, we love you, it's a beautiful color. So I just want to give you a comment. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Some people had said, well, why are people saying black? I think that is more inclusive for people who are not Americans or not citizens, or they're not, they're just visiting, for example. So yeah, that can be one difference. I think with that, we will close the questions, but thank you again, everyone, so much for all your input and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for everything. So we're moving now to the closing prayer. That will be read by Ryan Dorr.
O God, our Lord, protect us through thy covenant unto thee, and vouchsafe unto us that which well beseemeth thee. Give us more out of thy bounty, and bless us. Pardon us for the things we have done, and wash away our sins, and forgive us with thy gracious forgiveness. Verily, thou art the most exalted, the self-subsisting. Thy loving providence hath encompassed all created things in the heavens and on the earth, and thy forgiveness hath surpassed the whole creation. Thine is sovereignty. In thy hand are the kingdoms of creation and revelation. In thy right hand thou holdest all created things, and within thy grasp are the assigned measures of forgiveness. Thou forgivest whomsoever among thy servants thou pleasest. Verily thou art the ever-forgiving, the all-loving. Nothing whatsoever escapeth thy knowledge, and naught is there which is hidden from thee. O God our Lord, protect us through the potency of thy might, enable us to enter thy wondrous surging ocean, and grant us that which well befitteth thee. Thou art the sovereign ruler, the mighty doer, the exalted, the all-loving, the Bab.
Stephen, I think you're muted.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you everyone for attending. Our speaker next week is Rain Wilson. His topic is transcendence, where art and faith converge. Next week is going to be a very exciting week, so make sure everyone's here and make sure to invite all your friends and family. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for accepting us to speak. Thank you.
Bye.